Yeah, against this right back, Charlie's definitely.
Because you always use that active and defending. I think it's like.
People deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian. Come on, Ian. People deluded, I'm back again. The different knocks in the building, the dynamic duo, Mustafi's cousin, as his name says. How are you doing, my friend?
Very well, sir. Very well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How can I not be good? Martin Odegaard signed a new contract. We're going to get into that. We kicked off our return to the Champions League in the best way. And we've got the North London derby, man. Honestly, I don't know where to start. So in life, they say, if you don't know where to start, just make a start. Let's actually start with Everton, man, because, you know, we was meant to get a video done last week. We didn't. What was your thoughts with Everton before we obviously progress?
I was pleased with the way we adapted, I think was my main feeling. I felt as though once Martinelli came off, I liked the way we started changing our approach. It went a little bit more direct. I think we sort of passed off the park in the first 20 minutes. We changed our approach once he went off, which I was pleased with. The set pieces, I did a video on my channel about how we adapted our set pieces.
Check that out, folks.
My God.
Come on.
And there was just a number of different, and then also once we scored the goal, we completely shut down the game. So I was really pleased with the way we moved through the phases of the game. And, you know, Arteta's spoken about it, and we've spoken about it obviously before about like how we're trying to adapt, but to see it in practice was really encouraging. I think that was my main feeling. And also, you know, to get the monkey off the back in terms of that result, I think there's different games are important for different. Games are important for different reasons. And, you know, like I think I've said before, like the idea of an important game, it's like, well, all games are important if they're competitive, but you can have important games for different reasons. And for me, that was important because psychologically, to get that off. So yeah, I was really pleased.
You mentioned adapting. To an ignorant Arsenal fan who, you know, can hear what you're saying and comprehend it, what specifically do you mean by that?
There are no ignorant Arsenal fans. That's what I'll say first.
I like that. I mean, boy, our very Captain Martin Odegaard might have something to say about that, but go off, my friend.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting, actually, at the end, he does know who Clive is, by the way. I'm 90% sure.
He's blocked me, but big up Clive.
Has he?
Yeah, man. I don't know what I did to Clive, man. I don't know, man. Like, you're a good guy, Clive, man. I wanted you on the channel. You bring some views in, but it is what it is, man.
He's a nice guy. Yeah. I found, just a quick side note on that, I found interesting, and from various, I know people listen to online fan media at the club. Like I know that for a fact. I'm sure the players do. So I think it's, you know, it's important, you know, just to, you know, for all of us to like be cautious of that, because
he's saying they know who the different knock is.
Well, no, but you know, when you're putting your opinions out there constantly, I think it's important to be like, there's real people at the end of it. Do you know what I mean? I think that's something, you know, even in comments or whatever, I always just think like they feel so detached from us, but actually you just get little glimpses, like the end of the Odegaard interview. He's like, oh, cheers. He knows who Clive is. Fair. So I think we just need to be careful with that. But yeah, so what was the
adaptation.
Essentially, I think we might have said it on the last stream, I can't remember, but the idea, you know, Mikel's been speaking about the idea of like A1, A2, A3, the plan. I think that's been my big focus at the beginning of this season, working out what that means, working out how we get away from being. Essentially, I think Mikel thought we got found out at the end of last season and has spent the summer trying to work out different ways of approaching the game and being able to adapt differently. Obviously, that comes with adding players, of course, and adding skill sets. That is absolutely a part of it. But also adding players who have unpredictable skill sets in the sense that Havertz can move forward in a game, as we saw against PSV Eindhoven, and then back. Declan Rice can step into left and step back, adding adaptable, versatile players that can give you different things within games. I think, you know, we're moving away from this idea of the first 11 and you know, everyone in their rigid place. You are a right back, you are a left back. It's more about, okay, where can your skill set be aligned and best on the pitch? And I think that's an important sort of mentality shift, and a lot of people have done. But I think the adaptation that I see is in last season. We had that almost pretty much everyone could tell
predictable 11 to a degree.
Could say, right, Arsenal going to set up in a 3-2, Zinchenko inside, Saka Martinelli on the wings, Jesus up front. And then once that breaks down, we struggled. But now we can change it. We can add an extra player in the not so we haven't changed it before, but we're better at changing it now. We've added an extra player in the lane of attack, or we've gone into a bit more of a back five and Saka's dropped back, or whatever it is. It's that ability in game, also without the coach having to do something, without the coach having to go, right, Martin, you need to go here.
Right.
The players recognizing, for example, against Everton, once Martinelli went off, they stepped up. They were smashing us early in the midfield. Do you remember that was that period in sort of 20 minutes to about 30
I'm sure
minutes.
Saka's the only one other than us who remembers that, man. The amount of kicks he was getting in that period, ridiculous, man.
Yeah, but they stepped up about 5-10 yards, and it's on the pitch. And I'm sure Mikel says it as well, but it's also on the pitch, recognizing that's happened. How do we respond as a team? And that's the important part. It's the creating that. Sorry to bring up the pain, but Clive says one brain. It's creating that one brain. It's that ability to go, so we know our game model so well that it doesn't matter whether they have a player stepping into midfield. We know what do we do when a player steps into midfield. We do this, and creating that adaptability, it just makes us so much more resilient as a team.
I mean, and you're spot on there. I personally believe, the best footballers, while the manager, obviously, you're doing what the manager tells you, you have to listen to the manager. I think the best players recognize in-game situations and adapt accordingly between them and govern themselves. And I think, if you can look at Manchester City or when Liverpool won major honours, that's the sort of realm I believe Mikel Arteta is trying to get them to go to. It's like, if you've got parents, if your dad or mum tells you why you should look left and right while you cross the road, and they're taking you to do that every time, and you don't know why you're actually doing that, you might be in problems. Or if the fire is hot and they tell you it's hot, if you put your hand in it, it burns. And if you do it again, you're an idiot. So I think you're spot on and bang on the money. And I think, in terms of that, in terms of Arteta making us a bit unpredictable and, having a settled 11 to a degree, having a settled way of how we played like last season, and then adding layers and enhancing it and ultimately just making us a lot more unpredictable for actually it's quite fun for the fans, for Mikel Arteta, and obviously the players really. So you're bang on the money with that.
And it's that's a very good analogy, because when you're young, when you're a young team, your coach is telling you loads of different. I listened to. Didn't speak to Jack Grealish. I listened to Jack Grealish this week talking about a game where Pep pulled him back to left back and build up, and he's asked, "Do you know why that happened?" He's like, "Yeah, I can't tell you, but I knew. I didn't actually need to ask Pep. I knew why he was asking me to pull back to left back in build up." Because the principles are so sad. I don't know if you caught Thomas Frank on Monday Night Football. Yeah, but he was talking about the principles remain the same. This is top level coaching. The principles remain the same.
Exactly. And I'm happy you said that, because principles remain the same. I think fans, especially with the content we do, a lot of fans get hung up on settled formations and heat maps and all of these sort of things. Many formations throughout an 11 are quite fluid, and the principles remain the same. I always say to people, if you want to see how a game's going or dictate a game or ultimately win the game, don't watch the football. Watch what the 11 players, or better yet, 10 on either side out the field are doing. So you're bang on the money with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, that's an important lesson that I learned. You're constantly learning it, reminding yourself not to watch the ball. And it's which is why it's so great to live in this media space, because we can get access to these guys like Thomas Frank and Mikel or whatever. And you get little nuggets, and you go, okay, this is the clues. And he was saying, the principles remain the same. We adapt slightly depending on the opposition. So we might, he was talking about a situation where the ball was on the right-hand side. Okay, so our 8 drops back in. And what that means is our 9 needs to do this, whatever. The principles remain the same. It's just little tweaks. Okay, against this team, we need to do this. But the key part is when you're young, your mum or dad have to say to you, you need to brush your teeth, because otherwise you're gonna get plaque and X, Y, it's going to happen. Then what happens is you get a filling. I have like three fillings, and then you're like,
I've got
okay, I don't need my mum or dad to tell me I need to clean my teeth,
because you've learned through pain.
You learn through, exactly. You learn through the trauma, and we've gone through that trauma. We've gone through that trauma of away game at Newcastle in the 21-22 season. We've gone through the trauma of missing out on the title last season, and now all the things are coming together, and the team know. They go, well, I'm not doing it because Mikel's telling me to do it. I'm doing it because I've been working under this manager. I know that my player needs 3 options in possession in this phase. I don't need Mikel to say, by the way, you should have done that. I think it's a maturation, really, is what it is.
You're right in that, and that ultimately that's the level we need to go to, and that's the players individually, and that's why it's so keen to have players that it sounds silly, but they wax lyrical about Mikel Arteta, how he is as a person, obviously how he improves you collectively and individually. And I think one consistency, even the minute Declan Rice signed for the club, they talk about his footballing brain. And, you know, it's like they get to a point where obviously they've been a professional footballer, even if they're young for a few years, but they think they know football. And it's like you have a conversation with the manager or any other managers, because there's many in the game, where it's like, oh, actually, I don't know everything, or everything I thought was an absolute lie. And as you see with the way the game's adapting in terms of how left backs are playing, how strikers are playing, strikers aren't necessarily demanded to even score goals in this day and age, necessarily beyond the point.
Yeah.
I know me and you are very passionate about maybe bringing in another striker with X amount of goals. So you're bang on the money. You spoke about adaptation, and we're talking about not settled 11s. David Raya, he's come into the team for 2 games. While I don't think we've got to really see his traditional goalkeeping ability, that's nothing to do with him. Personally, I've been very impressed with the way he collects crosses, his calmness. I don't know why and things like that, but I feel this season Ramsdale hasn't been as expansive consistently over 90 minutes as he potentially could be with his passing. I think David Raya has displayed that. And one thing I like about David Raya, it seems like there's a higher level of focus. And even in the PSV game, when we was closing out either half, or even from the first whistle, he's going long at times. Like you can see him saying to the players, we're not playing out from the back for this particular one, go forward, in it. So what have you made of David Raya's 2 introductions? What do you make of him versus Aaron Ramsdale, man? Because I'm sure me and you are going to have that same debate game in, game out, really.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things until it's resolved either by one of them leaving or the fans accept that there is going to be, you know, Mikel's spoken this morning. I was just looking that he said, you know, I haven't made a decision over the North London derby. You can choose not to believe him. I believe him. I watched.
I believe him, but he must be playing a bit games with the game on Sunday.
I'm sure he's not going to tell you regardless. He's not, even if he has made a decision, he's not going to say. But when he says, no, I haven't made a decision, I do buy it. And if you don't, that's fine. I think he really is looking at the skill sets and going, right, what do we do? Now, something you said was interesting about you don't feel like he's been necessarily tested from a traditional standpoint. And I agree. I felt that as well. But in the 2 games, I actually looked at the numbers. He has faced like something like 8 shots or something over the course.
He hasn't had no. He obviously has had to make saves, and I'm not discrediting Raya because he's collected everything. But yeah, man.
The point more being that I was like, yeah, I feel that as well. I feel like he hasn't been really what's he had to do really. He's had, you know, a pretty quiet games. But then you start to go, oh, hang on a minute. If someone looks like they're having it's like Edison, like you feel like he never has to do anything. And then you're like, is that because his starting position is so good? Is that because everything looks so easy to him? When Raya claims crosses, when he's coming through body, he just plucks it out of the air.
I love that. And that's something Ramsdale needs to get into his game. You know, obviously, I don't want to be that guy because the same people that behave like David Raya is the Messiah, not discrediting him. The minute he makes a mistake, it's all going to be Ramsdale. I don't think it's either or. I think, like you said, we have to get comfortable. Like you said in the earlier live stream we did, you have to get comfortable with not having necessarily starters. And to a degree, we have to remove our personal attachments. For all of Ramsdale's faults, there's a lot to like about the guy. I just feel like, you know, you've got to just accept them for what they are. I just think it's a bit interesting when Arteta speaks about, you know, different games in different situations. I would like to know specifically for Arteta what he demands of Raya as opposed to Ramsdale. So you're bang on there. And I think you made a good point. And I kind of echo it before in that I want my keeper to be the lowest rated player every game we play, because that means my keeper don't have to do anything. If Raya or Ramsdale are in the starting lineup for the rest of the season and all me and you are doing and saying that they haven't been tested and their ball playing abilities there,
exactly,
I'm all for it, man. What have you made of Raya so far? And would you start him in the North London derby as well?
As we said, like I don't feel like he's been particularly tested. As I say, I think a lot of that is because he is so calm and he is so well adjusted. I do think we need to see him in a game where he's possibly going to be more tested. But I think also a point you made earlier about Ramsdale, like being involved less in the distribution. I think the stats are correct that in 2021, was that his first season? Or 21-22, I can't remember. The first season he was here, he had 38 touches per game. And he's now having like under 30 a game. Like he's having a lot less of the ball. And the team is playing a lot further up the pitch, which then calls for a different style of goalkeeper. I don't know right now what a Ramsdale game is and what a Raya game is, or even if that's going to be a thing, because you could argue, you know, we saw some reports yesterday saying that, you know, Ramsdale, Raya's, Ramsdale's been dropped and he's leaving to Chelsea. I don't.
I mean, it was
personally.
predictable. The minute he didn't start, I'm pretty sure you saw 24 hours later, Chelsea, Bayern Munich, he wants to leave, he wants to this. I think me and you and everybody listening, you're not stupid. There might be a reality where either keeper has to leave or it has to be made clear who is the number one. But Ramsdale has to have been briefed that Raya is coming in to provide you with competition, may the best man win. I don't know what Mikel Arteta has told Raya. He could have sat there and said, you're the number one target. Once upon a time, you're going to be the number one. Or he could have said, Ramsdale, expect your game time to be limited. What I would like to ask Mikel Arteta, if there's a gun to your head and someone's going to blow your brains out if you do not get 3 points, what starting 11 would you deploy? And specifically, what keeper? No, we won't get hung up on the opponent. And I think that kind of lies with the player he trusts the most. Would you say, because I think it's harsh, and I think you think a bit like me in that there's neither really a right or wrong answer. Would you say Raya is an upgrade on Ramsdale just based on what you know of Raya and what you've seen of Raya in an Arsenal shirt and in a Brentford one for that matter?
If I had a gun to my head, I would answer Raya, is what I'll say. I think again, as I said, I don't know what a Raya game is versus a Ramsdale game necessarily in terms of like, I fit what I can see is two very similar goalkeepers and one who has slightly outstanding qualities in terms of, you look at the shot stopping numbers, look at the crosses claim numbers, and I think in terms of distribution, Raya's a little bit better. That's how I feel. But also, the other side of it, can I see Raya pulling out the Salah save last season? Honestly, no. There was a save against Bournemouth as well, where like in those moments, I spoke to John Harrison, the goalkeeping coach, and he said like the thing with Ramsdale is his highs are so high, his lows can be really low.
Yeah, so there's not a base level.
When you're a goalkeeper, when you're a coach, when you're a manager, who you picking in that game? You're picking the steady Eddie, right? I think Ramsdale possibly, and I absolutely could be wrong here, possibly has the higher potential. But right now, like the question, the undoubted he's going to get there. I don't know whether it is there, and I think basically they've sat there in the summer and gone, right, Ramsdale has this ceiling as a goalkeeper. He could be one of the best, if not the best, top 3 goalkeepers in the world. Right now, he's not there, and the question is, how do we get him to there? I don't think without getting Ramsdale essentially into a fight with another top goalkeeper, you're going to get him there. I think that's how he responds. I think at the minute, Raya is probably better than him. Again, I'm still unclear on what a Raya game is, what a Ramsdale game is. I'm still a little bit blurry on their profiles. But I think hopefully what we see is the response. And we're sat here, on Friday the 22nd of September, and people are saying, oh, it's already happened. It's done. He's never going to
football fans love a conclusion, mate.
Of course. And it's like, okay, fine. But wouldn't the amazing thing be Raya starts the season, Ramsdale responds incredibly. We see some incredible performances in the Champions League or the Cup or whatever. And then he comes back into the league team, a better player in 6 months' time. And then Raya, maybe sticks around for a bit and leaves. That would be an incredible thing. Or Raya's the better keeper and we move on. So, either way we win. But yeah, that, I don't know. I don't go in for this idea that Ramsdale's been dropped and it's all, I do believe Mikel when he said it on Sky. He said like, we're looking for 2 players in every position who can answer different questions from different. And people say, "Oh, it's just he's not going to say."
I would love to know what the questions are, but people don't want to hear that, bro. They don't want to hear what it's quite silly.
I believe him when he says we have 2 top players in opposition.
Especially when you see what City and Brighton do from time to time as well.
Yeah, and there was rumours that Pep was going to start the season with Ortega. Like we know that I'm sure they're very, very close. It's like you ever have an exam where it's like a pass or fail.
Yeah,
I remember my mate was trying to get into university, and it was for acting, and he used to get really, really close, but he never quite got across the line. And we used to have conversations about like the range is here, right, and the pass level is here. You could be here and this far off being, in, but you still get the same result as you do when you're here.
As my man, that's further away. Great example.
You get the same result as someone who has absolutely no ability at all. You have loads of ability, but you just need to get across the line. And
you're in the same realm, essentially. That's a great example.
But you get the same answer. So you have to try and consider it as like Ramsdale's probably really, really close. There's just a few things. And I think within 6 months, maybe he improves, whatever, working with Raya, whatever, and gets over the line. Who knows? So it's not a case of he thinks he's terrible and that's it. I don't think at all.
And I think you made a great point in relation to the base level of performance. You know, if somebody can be 20 out of 10 for the next 2 weeks, and then over a course of 10 games, it fluctuates negatively, and you've got someone, not saying that this is either Raya or Ramsdale, but you've got someone that's going to give you 6s and 7s. As a manager, you're always going to go for that. I'm a big fan of Ramsdale, and admittedly, I don't like to criticize him because I think he faces up to the music. He holds his own. I do think he's one of those players, a bit like the centre half Gabriel, in that, you know, when they make these mistakes, by all means, hold them to accountability. But I think when they played well, when, you know, let's just say Saka scores, Martinelli scores, Trossard comes off the bench and does something great. I think players like Ramsdale, Gabriel, to a degree, even Benjamin White, they don't necessarily get their plaudits because they're not really going to write headlines. I think Ramsdale comes into his own when there's just chaos, like you said, you know, with the example you made. You look at Anfield, you look at, you know, the Leicester one a few years ago. I just think with Ramsdale, it's just about tuning 1-2 things out of his game, just a bit level of focus, sometimes being a little less emotional and not playing up to the crowd. But I think Raya's a bit more headstrong in that regard. I think that goes against Ramsdale. There has been numerous times, as I always say, the goal is your last line of defense. So before I ask a question of Raya or Ramsdale, I always look at the other factors. There has been a couple of times where, you know, maybe someone's lost the ball in midfield, we've not followed runners, etc., etc. And then when it's come to Ramsdale, it might have been, you know, I might think, bro, you know, it's your near post, could you have done better? Or you've gone over the shot when it's under. These natural things can be ironed out of his game. And, you know, the real winners are Arsenal. You know, whether Raya has to sit on the bench or Ramsdale, my heart bleeds for them, but to a degree, I don't care. I care about what can get Arsenal to that next level. And if that gets Raya and Ramsdale as the best keepers ever, fight it out really and truly. And I think Ramsdale's very mature. He arrived at this club where he obviously had to fight Leno for his spot, and I haven't got the interview to hand, but I remember when he got his opportunity, he said, I didn't expect to get it as soon as I did. Obviously Ramsdale's got a bit of this for England. You know, Pickford does play quite well for England, to be fair, but you could argue Ramsdale should be the number one. So he's got to be a bit mature in that. And Ramsdale strikes me as a fighter. You know, you've been living a dream as an Arsenal player, playing week in, week out. You've quashed all of those rumours and concerns fans had about he's a relegation quality keeper. You're doing quite well. You've just got a new deal and whatnot, and you're a key part to Arteta's team. So I think he won't run away from it. He won't run away from a fight. And to go back to your point about having two options, you know, we're going to have these question marks. We've already seen Mikel Arteta, for one reason or another, make difficult decisions, dropping Havertz, starting Havertz, dropping Gabriel, moving Partey around. Had Timber have been fit, we might be having the same similar conversation in relation to either Zinchenko or Benjamin White. Another one who probably in the summer, I know Timber started playing left back, but he's probably thinking, oh, Benjamin, it might be a bit peak for you to a degree. So I think we have to get comfortable with it. That's the only way we're going to get to the next level. I think unless you're like, you know, City, they play a bunch of different players, and there are some players that play their way into form. But historically, you know, you're going to see Diaz, Kevin De Bruyne, or Haaland. These kind of guys are going to play. You know, you look at Arsenal's team at this moment in time, you know, Saliba, even Jesus, I would say Jesus, but he's even held bench when he's come back from injury. You know, unless it's Saka, Odegaard, and Saliba, you probably are not necessarily going to start week in, week out, unless, you know, Arteta thinks you're the guys. And the natural trajectory of the club, naturally, Saka and Odegaard, if they're having a wobble, there's going to be issues. One criticism I would say, which wasn't Ramsdale's fault, and I got a lot of time for Matt Turner, but he was nowhere near Ramsdale in terms of ability. Now with Ramsdale and Raya, you've got to be on it every training session, every minute you get, and ultimately stay ready so you don't need to get ready. So it's an interesting point. Who would you start Raya in the North London derby? Because for me, I said when he started against Everton, when I ended my watch along, I said, you know what, for the next 3 or so games, I want to see Raya because that will make Ramsdale a bit more hungrier. Don't get it twisted. I felt sorry for Ramsdale to not necessarily start against PSV, and I'll be gutted for him if he doesn't start in the North London derby. But at the end of the day, the collective comes first. If Mikel Arteta gets it wrong, we ask questions. But if he starts them strong players, he's not going to deploy a system or a player that isn't going to help us get 3 points. So if it is Raya, it is what it is. So I'd go with Raya, to be fair, on Sunday. Who would you go with?
Yeah, I'm going to try and find the PPDA numbers. I'm not sure they're up. I think basically Spurs try and press teams. Like they really do. And I think
they do. They're quite high for high turnovers in that.
Yeah. Then in that case, I would probably prefer to have Raya. To pick those balls out and behind. I think he's probably, he's played the last 2 games. He's going to be a little bit sharper, whatever. So personally, I go with Raya. I did think,
and he's less emotional for me in a game like that. You need to be a bit calculated. Not that I don't want Ramsdale to play, or it couldn't be a benefit.
You could also flip it on its head and say, Ramsdale, he's going to be more up for the fight or whatever because he's more.
That's what I'm saying. That could also be a gift, really. So it's exactly. A great. Listen, we got good problems, bro. We got good problems. Come a long way from Marie and Holding being our best centre half pairing, allegedly.
my cousin. Yeah, the thing with I did feel though with the PSV thing when I think sometimes if you're looking at Ramsdale v Turner, there's a very different stylistic thing there. Or you're looking at Zinchenko and Tierney as an example. If you're playing Zinchenko and you're sticking him in the, and you're inverting your fullback, you go, okay, I get that Tierney's not playing because that's a new style. Like it's not that he's saying Tierney's terrible. It's just
apples and oranges essentially, man.
Yeah, it's completely different. I think Ramsdale and Raya at the moment, and this is possibly because I'm not a goalie expert. I see a difference, but the difference is like a couple of percent. It's not negligible.
They're not out of
small.
each other's world. Yeah, you're right.
They're not, and you look at the numbers from last season, Ramsdale's like 3 off in terms of overall goalkeeper value on the
near enough identical.
Yeah, like, yes, okay, there are differences, but then I just don't think they add up to this huge thing. And in a Champions League final, I think those differences are massive, are important. You have to start thinking about really fine margins because the teams are so close. We're better than PSV. We beat them 4-0. Could we not have won that game with Ramsdale in net to give him
anyone
moment?
that disagrees with what you just said is a hater, isn't it? Really, like we could have won that with Ramsdale.
We could have won it with Ramsdale, and therefore I think, okay, I understand that Mikel's idea is like we are doing everything we possibly can to win every single game, but you also rotated, so you are aware that you took players off, so you're aware that this was a game that was not. You didn't need everyone on the whole time. We had a capacity to win this rather than like say against Spurs where the margins are a bit finer, right? And then I think I look back over the last 2 years and I'm like, did Ramsdale has done so much for us over the last 2 years. I think giving him that moment of his Champions League debut under the lights, big moment at the Emirates, mate, I'm letting you go. You're not playing at the weekend. You're not playing last weekend, but you are getting that Champions League moment. I think it's really important for a player to feel loved and respected. And obviously, the immediate response to that is it doesn't matter. You got to win the game.
I can't lie. I'm like that. I agree with you. Like with my Arsenal hat on, my Wenger hat on. But on the other hand, I don't give a flying monkeys. I want 3 points in the opening Champions League game. Fuck Ramsdale in that regards. Respectfully,
I get that. But when the margins are here, I'm much more in that camp of do whatever.
No, I agree with you.
When the margins are here, I'm like, there's got to be, especially with players who are like this far off each other. Surely you give Ramsdale that moment. I personally just felt that was harsh.
I think it was harsh, but harsh decisions have to be made, man. There's 5 other games. Do your thing. I was so big on, for me anyways, in that PSV game, I didn't really want rotation. I wanted a strong team because I'm not being funny. It is the Champions League. I think while Arteta can rotate in different teams, our players need to be comfortable with playing 3 games a week. For me, it was imperative of starting that group stage with 3 points and starting it in the right way, because the quicker we can qualify, the quicker we can make changes. As you know yourself, you look at the fixture list, they're starting to come thick and fast. We've got the League Cup coming into play next week. I do agree with you that having played a key part in ultimately getting us to that holy grail of being back in the Champions League, I would have loved to have seen Ramsdale start. He deserves it and he'll be gutted. But all I would say is channel that energy. Keeping up the theme with those sort of players, yeah. Havertz. Now, I think personally, the PSV game, Havertz, it was more of the same in that I think, we've spoken about off the ball, all of those sort of things. He's great. I think he's fitted in well. I think he looked better when he went up front, but it's another game where maybe, quote unquote, you're wanting a bit more. The only real criticism of Havertz beyond the obvious I personally have is, it's another chance where you could have scored. He should have had an assist for Jesus, to be fair. Where are you at with Havertz? And even in relation to the North London derby, are you Fabio Vieira versus Havertz? Do you even gamble on a Jorginho or Smith Rowe? Probably not going to see that. What's your thoughts on that left 8? Because that's probably one of the only undecided areas.
I personally would go for Vieira because I don't think Spurs' midfield is massively heavyweight. And I think in terms of I don't think the duels are not going to... I think we've got enough, basically. I think we don't need to... At the moment, the outstanding quality Havertz has, he wins a lot of duels. He's a physical. You can play the ball up to him, long and
won the most against PSV, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Arsenal.
His physical capacity is right now because that's what he has, But there's a moment in that PSV game where he's not through on goal, but you just think you're rapid, mate. I think it was a moment where there's a defender maybe just there, but he's here and he's got the space to run into to get beyond them and go and have a shot. And I just think you can see his confidence is kind of
on the floor at the moment, personally.
Yeah. So I think the thing with the thing that I'm missing is a zip in his passes. The passes all feel a little bit languid. And the thing I'm missing is a burst across the first 5 yards. I think that first intensity across the run, and again, it's not every player needs to be Bruno Guimaraes. Not every player needs to be snap into the tackle. Not every player needs to be Julian Timber, who every action is so sharp.
And to be fair to Havertz, in relation to that snapping into tackles, he actually puts in quite a shift, as you were saying. To be fair to him,
yeah, in terms of the numbers, yeah, but I think in terms of the offensive capacity, that sort of sharpness of action. You need in a symphony. You need staccato and legato. Like you need difference. Like
what an example.
To make it make sense, right? Right. And Timber is staccato, and that's fine. But I think sometimes the game calls for something different. The game calls for a sharp action, something quick, and then you can relax back into it. I like the player. I think he has a lot of capacity, but I think at the moment, he's still finding his feet at the club. And I know we're all expecting results immediately, but our expectations are of the team and of the club. We've seen this project coming, since 2019? We've been growing. We got so close.
Steady trajectory.
So we're like, let's go. Havertz is probably a year, maybe even 2 years behind what I think he'll be doing, and peaking at Arsenal. Right, I think imagine when Martin Odegaard first came in. Martin Odegaard,
some people say, get Buendia, don't bring him back on loan. Yeah, we just mentioned Fabio Vieira. He hasn't done much, but he looks a dramatically better player because he's adapted, fit, had a preseason, look more confident. So you're bang on the money. We don't know where Havertz is, but I wouldn't write him off at the moment.
The project is at a certain stage, and Havertz's footballing career is at a different stage. Martin Odegaard is at the same stage as the project. Bukayo Saka is at the same stage as the project. Jesus is at the same, these are just about, entering their peak guys who are really at it.
Ready to get results today, per se.
Exactly. And Kai Havertz, I think, is we bought him a little bit with an eye on the future. I think with an eye on a big striker who can play off him as well. So I don't know. I just think I'd take him out of the limelight. I'd use him in certain phases. I think he'll probably end the season with like 15 goals and assists, and people will say in all comps, and people will say, "Oh, it was all right, a bit rubbish. I don't know why we bought him." I think next season is where we start to, and then what will happen? What will happen? Everyone will go, "Saw it. It was always
believed in him, mate. Always believed in him. Super Mick Arteta."
Yeah, never doubted him, and we see it with Pep as well. It just we can't put these managers in terms of the results they're getting in the same bracket and expect Mikel Arteta to get over the line against Pep, right? And then say, well, but his football is way easier to understand. Pep's football, which Mikel should be matching, needs a year, but Mikel's football, which should be matching it, doesn't take a year. It's simple. It's like that doesn't make any sense. So we have to allow players to have time. We're seeing the results with Fabio Vieira. We've seen Odegaard, step up and whatever, and he's just at the bottom of the escalator. And we need to give him time.
And it's not quite the same, but you could argue William Saliba as well, due to, when the time he actually was integrated into Mikel Arteta's systems versus how long he was at the club from the point of Arteta walking in. He had a couple of loans and a lot of conclusions were drawn. The funny thing is, I don't know with Havertz if I would start him. I'm a bit conflicted, and admittedly, I'm happy I'm not Mikel Arteta. I think the main reasons I would start Fabio Vieira is, I don't think he was amazing against Everton, but he did more, quote unquote, than Havertz in his display. And I think it's the confidence. When you're confident, it's the North London derby, the system, the project, etc. But selfishly, from a human point of view, Fabio Vieira plays in the position where minutes are quite scarce. You've just seen Havertz come in. You've got the luxury of Rice there. You've got a couple of people in and around you. When he signed for the club, you had Granit Xhaka and Odegaard, two linchpins of what Arteta is doing. So when you've been starved for minutes, when you join the team, with your leg in a boot, when you've not had a pre-season, when you've not been given really that opportunity, you've got that selfish reason to just want to perform for myself. Obviously, all the other factors, but for myself, I want to play games. So I think the confidence, Havertz, I don't think he looks like your confidence is on the floor, like I said earlier, but you look unsure. Fabio, for me, looks like he's playing with a swagger. He's believing in himself and all of those things. So I'd kind of bet on that. But then I look at Havertz and I just feel, do you know what? Especially if Raya plays, because Raya does look to pull it, go long a lot of the times. And I think Havertz gets that. And I would just love for Havertz to score in the North London derby. Admittedly, you won't draw any conclusions, but you'll do well to shut up some Arsenal fans. Yeah,
That's
you will
it.
shut up a lot of fans. So I'm
Best player ever.
I'm conflicted. And you could argue I wouldn't even go for Smith Rowe because he looks a bit rusty, even though he was decent off the bench. But you could argue Smith Rowe's name could be in there. You could argue throwing a Jorginho by the similar logic with Newcastle. It'll be an interesting one, and I'm happy I'm not Mikel Arteta. Arteta, speaking of that, go on.
The other
go on.
option,
Go on
sorry,
to your next one.
just to cut across you. The other option is you put Trossard in the left 8 and put Nelson in there. The reason I'd be interested in that, I probably wouldn't do it, but I'd be interested in it, is Porro loves getting up and down the wing, and he's not amazing defensively. So I think you have a bit more of a kind of a runner winger in Nelson compared to a more of a combination winner.
Even Reece Nelson, you're right in that regards as well. Nelson looked good off the left-hand side. Obviously, he's probably going to get more game time off the right. You could argue that. I wouldn't gamble against Spurs. I wouldn't do it with Trossard as a thing. But you are right. It is a thing. I mean, for me, that's probably the only. There's probably 3 areas really, and one I'm probably over exaggerating. Would you go Eddie Nketiah or Jesus? And do you think Jesus or Eddie Nketiah will play up front? Because I think Jesus, but I'm not sure. He needs to for me.
Jesus. Yeah, I mean, you see how much more fluid our attack is when Jesus is there. He was so good against PSV and lifts all boats. Like he's
him and Odegaard possessed yesterday. Well, on Wednesday.
And like I don't know if we've talked about this before, but like you look at his numbers now, and he's apart from his goals, what else do you want your striker to offer? His numbers are like in terms of like non-penalty XG, shots, assists, expected assists, shot creating actions, pass. He's everywhere. Like in terms of forwards, so
it's like Arteta said, he transformed our team. Like again, people look at that and say, "Oh, he got 11 goals. How could he transform it?" If you're actually watching Arsenal with your 2 eyes, elite signing for us. Signing.
If Jesus scored 25 goals a season, which by the way he has the capacity to do, but I don't think
too good of a player not to.
He would be considered one of the best players in the world. He would, in my opinion, he would be in that Haaland. Not necessarily, maybe. Well, I don't. Maybe the step below the Haaland and Mbappe level. Like I'd say those are 2 in their own category, but that next level, De Bruyne's, whatever.
The Osimhen's and them kind of players, really and truly. Yeah, you're right, man. That's the only thing lacking in Jesus' goal. Game. We all know why Jesus signed for us. He's a very good, versatile player, a very good player, attitude spot on. He's lovely as to have as a manager, but he's always been described as a defensive striker. It's just about doing everything that Gabriel Jesus does, but literally doing the hardest thing in football, putting the ball in the back of the net. I don't know why he's not quite clinical. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know what it is, but I agree with you in that he's too good not to.
Our team's set up for him to facilitate more than finish. Do you know what I mean? So I think in some ways people, there's that Zinchenko interview where he's like, every time you're dropping deep, but sometimes I want you to stay there. But that's what he does. That's
him, isn't it? Really.
Like it's the Saka and Martinelli. The reason they're flourishing so much is because of Jesus. So it's kind of a catch-22. Like if he scored more goals, I think we'd see less from Saka and Martinelli. So
I think, yeah, man, I'm with you. So I do think Eddie doesn't necessarily deserve to be dropped, but we bought players like like Gabriel Jesus to make a difference in those sort of games. So Jesus plays. Where you at on the left-hand side? I know Martinelli's had an injury. Arteta, bit of gamesmanship. Maybe Martinelli isn't in the squad. Maybe he starts. Maybe he's on the bench. Personally, I'm a bit conflicted because I think Martinelli should play. It's a North London game, but I think Trossard has looked very good. People are onto me because I've said Trossard is overrated. They've not let me explain why. I said I think he's a very good player. I just think Arsenal fans move like he's world class and like he's an assurance to start. That's all I was saying. I think he's a quality player. I actually think he's the best finisher at the club. And I do think a bit like how you've seen Eddie Nketiah get his form, a bit like how we're kind of talking about Fabio Vieira. I think sometimes you kind of have to play on these players in a purple patch, and I think that could be extended to Trossard. Really, what's that? Two goals and an assist in 3 games, and it's not exactly 90 minutes, something like that. So I would start Trossard if I'm honest. I would go with Trossard. Where are you at with Martinelli and Trossard?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Martinelli's going to be fit, so I think I think Mikel said he's like, we're still assessing him. He might be ready. So it sounds like he's probably going to be involved maybe in the next game. I doubt he'll be involved in this game. Trossard start. I mean, I agree. Actually, I think he probably is off both feet in terms of an overall finisher, the best finisher at the club.
I don't think he get the most goals, but he is one of the best finishers. The best finisher.
There's better finishers off each individual foot, but in terms of an overall package of best finisher, I would say Trossard. I think I suppose with Trossard, he has. I think when you put him in the right zones, he's top. He's really, really good. But if he gets isolated down the left-hand wing, I think we can see him become a little bit predictable. He's not got the sort of physical capacity to burst.
It's a bit touch and go, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, he's more of a combination. So which is why I think, and again, it's all about environment. It's like if we played with, let's say, I don't know, more like let's say we played in like a Liverpool sense.
Well, you're getting the ball behind a lot more.
You're getting the ball in behind with your fullbacks are dominating a bit more. Your fullbacks having more touches. Their stuff in that just in behind in that 8. Trossard would cook like one of those like, attacking players who could also press for you. He would absolutely cook. He'd look unbelievable. But in this team, because our left winger at the moment is expected to be a bit more of a runner, and our right winger is more of a ball to feet creator. When he's in there, because he's not going to get in this on this side. When he's in there, the dynamics aren't perfect. And I think our left 8 needs to be a bit more physical and a little bit more. I think needs to be a more of a defender than he is. So, and again, then it's not to say therefore he's rubbish. It's to say he does 95% of the job in all of the categories, and therefore he's not quite right. But that's great. It's perfect to have someone who can come up and play essentially 3 positions: left wing, left 8, and number 9. And do 95
really. You say the 10, you could play him in the hole behind the striker as well. You'd say 4, really. He's probably our most adaptable player in the front 4. I also think one thing that goes against Trossard, like I always try to put myself in Mikel Arteta's shoes. It's not, I think we've got a good bench, we've got good impactors and things, but I just think the fact that Trossard, a lot of the time he's come off the bench and like against Everton and played bloody well. I think Arteta likes that luxury of knowing you could really impact the game. With the others, we don't necessarily know. I think Trossard is almost quote unquote guaranteed to do such. So it's an interesting debate, really and truly. Other than that, I don't think there's, I expect to see Benjamin White, obviously Saka. If Declan Rice isn't there or Odegaard, there's an issue. On the topic of Odegaard, I mean, I'm pretty sure I know your opinion, but I have a duty to ask you. Would you make it a new deal, man? The latest, man, hella new deal's been given out. I'm pretty sure you're agreeing with me in that, to see players signing new deals as consistently and no dramas. You look at certain clubs in Manchester, every time that you type them in on Twitter, there's something. I could shed a tear, man. Like, we finally just talk about football. Like, the biggest talking point with Ryan Ramsdale is because of football. It's crazy. Not bust-ups with the managers and stuff like that. It's amazing.
It's incredible. Stuff. There was what was it? I can't remember who it was, but essentially someone put out all of the contract extensions in the last 12 months, and it's incredible. We've completely tied down. That's it.
So you're not going to praise me for the tabs improving? Like, come on, mate. Like, it's still like we're improving.
Slightly better.
Exactly.
Slightly
come
better.
on, improve.
That still gives me anxiety, but that's fine.
Give me my flowers.
Yeah, that still really stresses me out, but fine. Gabriel, Martinelli, Ramsdale, Saka, Nelson, Saliba, Odegaard. Like, it's an unbelievable set of
and we probably could throw Benjamin White into that as well, really.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be done. So, it's and I think there's going to come a time where this doesn't feel as easy. Like, because it's kind of easy to, not easy, it's easier to get a player to sign that second big deal, right? You either get in someone in the first time, you either sign someone and they sign their first deal.
I love where this is going.
That second one is like, okay, like if everything's going well, it makes sense 2 or 3 years later to sign that deal. That third deal is always hard.
Saka, Martinelli in particular.
Yeah, Saka has signed his that first deal in like 2020 when he broken through whatever. That's quite easy. That second one, I'm not saying it was easy, but it's the project is doing this, so it's like in many ways it feels like it's going somewhere. That third deal will be hard. So yeah, same with Odegaard signed his first deal. That second deal, it all feels like it's doing this, especially when you're signing your first deal at most of our players are coming in at 20, 21, 22, 23. When you're signing it at 24, 25, 26, it's like, okay, you're entering that peak. That final thing, do we give them that contract at 28 years old? Do we give them that contract when they're peaking? And where's if the project is here? The question is that going to sustain or is it going to start to tail off? That's the more tricky one. I'm not the club have done amazing work. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's obvious what we needed to do. All of those players needed new deals. They all would have, I think, felt as though the project's going the right way. And it's just a case of,
and they don't have interest from clubs elsewhere, really and truly.
Yeah, but
because so it's nice to tie them down.
where the project is, again, I'm not saying it's the difference between easy and straightforward. So something can be straightforward but hard, but still straightforward. I think things are going to be less straightforward moving forward.
I'm with you with that. And I think, I'd compare it to when Henry left, when we got to the Emirates in that. Obviously, I'm not comparing any of these players to Henry, and with the greatest of respect to Reece Nelson, I'm kind of more focusing this conversation on the Martinellis, the Salibas, the Sakas, and obviously Martin Odegaard. I call it the Henry stage in this, really, in that you might get to a stage where I hope it's not, we're winning trophies and we're doing things, but where the club is kind of what you said and where you want to go in the age you're at, latter 20s, you might have a decision to make, which is also why I'm happy we've signed new deals. I hope that this core group or crop of players can achieve something, but I'm not expecting, and I'm sure you're not either. I hope Saka can, but I'm not expecting these players to end their career at Arsenal. That's just unfortunately not the way football goes. People want a new situation. People want a new environment. Yeah, who knows? Mikel Arteta, they all might be there. Mikel Arteta might want to try something. We've got to remember, they've all come to love the club, but it's not like they grew up 5 minutes away from the stadium. Their whole family's there. It's essentially a job, which is why I'm so happy that we've tied these players down to a new deal. Out of all of them, what would you say is the most important one? If you could only pick one.
Saka.
I rate that. You didn't even hesitate. I hear it.
Saka. Because maybe Saliba. But the question is, it's like, okay, in terms of talent in their position, you're hiring for a job and you've got 10 positions to fill. And all of them are different. And, you have to be very specific. And you're trying to sign the very best. And we're in terms of a job, like a right winger at a football club, Bukayo Saka, you could argue, is right now the biggest talent.
Oh, he's a top 5 right winger in world football. Nobody can say anything. Yeah, maybe even winger full stop, really. Mbappe, Vinicius are better than him. Other than that, boy, he's there.
But Vinicius, like even then, they're playing on the left hand side. So I'd argue.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Wingers in total.
Yeah. Sorry, wingers in total. Yeah. So on the right hand side, you could. There's an argument that Salah is better than Saka. I probably maybe in terms of output, I could agree with you there. But in terms of the talent in the world right now, young talent, he is top. So you've gone out there and you've got the best number one as an employer in the world. You've gone out and got Bill Gates you've gone out and got Mark Zuckerberg, or you've gone out and got Jeff Bezos before they become Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. Like, you've gone and done that. So then the question is, like, okay, the other guys, like Martin Odegaard, I think he's top 10 in his position and could become top. So in terms of those attacking midfield roles, I think he's top 10, but he's not the very best in the world. Saliba is maybe the only other one where I say, in terms of going out there and buying the guy before he becomes the guy, like Saliba, I think will be the best centre back in the world within probably 2 years. So again, maybe you could argue that, but I think Saka right now is maybe, you could argue, number one right wing talent in the world.
I'm a bit conflicted, and I asked you because I went against my own logic. I agree with you in that Saka, for obvious reasons, we need a right winger anyways. Lord knows how much it would cost to buy Saka if he was, I don't know, at another Premier League club. I think it would have sent out a bad message to the club. He's a homegrown lad. If Saka wasn't necessarily convinced, what would it have made? And I think that's a signal that, if he's happy, everybody's happy. I then start to think, is it actually Martin Odegaard? Because Martin Odegaard's the captain. He kind of is Arteta's lieutenant on the pitch, especially now that Xhaka's gone. And he was someone for me that kind of signifies the vision when it became clear that there wasn't a vision, and that when he came into the club in January, it was a testing period. And then I flip it on its head, and then I say, could it arguably be Saliba for reasons you've also said, but the fact of, I'm not in the negotiations, but I do think Saka was relatively straightforward. I think to a degree, Martin Odegaard was relatively straightforward. I also believe the same with Saliba, but then again, it wasn't always an easy, not that it was easy for any of these players, but I don't think it was an easy path for Saliba. It looked a bit kind of clouded, and I always wondered, would Saliba not hold it against the club? But do you think about how, you wasn't necessarily playing, you wasn't kind of a part of the project necessarily? Me and you both know from a footballing point of view, simply put, the man wasn't ready. But just to play devil's advocate, because I feel Saliba was the one I actually thought out of all of them might drag on. But when the manager's playing you, when the system's there, it just makes sense. And I also feel people are sleeping on Gabriel, big Gabriel, in terms of his potential and how much of a centre half he is. Shout out to Nelson. I kind of rank that in the same scale as Eddie and Ketia, in that you hope they continue to develop and do what they're doing, and they are. But it also gives us a bit of protection in terms of if we want to sell these players, because unfortunately, Nelson's obviously an adaptable player and Eddie's showing a lot. But if we keep going to the capacity we are in terms of improving, they might find game time at some point kind of hard to get, especially for Eddie if you sign another striker. So, I mean, credit to Edu really and everybody connected with the club because we're finally doing the basic competencies that we've lacked for years. So shout out to them essentially, really. You'll get no complaints from me. To kind of wrap this up though, let's get back on the North London derby. What are you expecting in this game, man? Have you actually been taking in Spurs? Because for me, don't want to praise them, but Postecoglou's quite a likable guy. I think they're playing with a lot of intention, a lot of invention in their play. A bit like us, I don't think, they give up until the final whistle. I still think the play isn't quite as fluid. I do think there's a lot of shots that they allow on their goal. And I do think some of the games they've made it harder than it needs to be. I think they've actually got more clean sheets than us, but we've conceded less goals than them. So it could be a decent game. And we all know there'll probably be a penalty for someone in it. So where are you at with the North London derby? At least there's no Harry Kane.
The only... Do you want to share my screen?
Go on.
The only thing I'm worried about is Maddison picking up the ball in these areas and driving inside. When he did it a lot against Sheffield, he's done it a lot in this season. He's managing to drop into the sort of left half space, pick it up from Van der Ven or from Doggy or whatever, and drive in here. When he's in here, he's not saying he's one of the best in the world, but when he's running with the ball, he's one of the best in the Premier League. I think you can shut him down in other areas, but when he's running,
it's a shame that I have to pretend to hate him, man.
Yeah. So when you play that final ball, got a funny story about it, by the way. I'll tell you after. When you play the final ball, I think he could be one of the best in the world. The one that's really the only threat that I think I look at Spurs and I go, I'm worried about that. And Son in behind. That's the one thing. Other than that, I'm looking
transitions.
But to be honest, it's more a doggy. Like I don't rate massively, and I think.
I've got to disagree. Well, in fact, no, I'm not going to disagree because I'm not going to talk up them Spurs lads. But I had a video on him a few years ago. I think he's a player, lad. I think he's a player. He's not quite the levels, but I think he's a player, man.
I think I'm not saying he couldn't get there, but I think if you look at him where he's at right now and what he's doing right now in the team, I think credit to him. But I think I don't rate massively in terms of I think he can be undone because I think sometimes he's in this sort of weird hybrid where he's being asked to step into midfield at times, but also get beyond the touch. I think there's times
that presses like a striker sometimes, man.
I
don't want to see that at the Emirates.
He makes the wrong decision at times. From when I've been watching, I think he's gone in and got caught in behind, or he's got and
shows his age.
That's a hard thing. Yeah, exactly. He's just young. Pedro Porro as well can get caught. So I think we can exploit the wide areas. I'm pretty certain of that. I rate Van der Ven. I really think Van der Ven is good.
I like him as well.
Romero steps in way too early and gets space in behind. So I just think there's a number of places where if you're an opposition coach and you're looking at Saliba, you're like, how do we get it? How do we get this guy?
I'm happy we ain't got to deal with that. The only thing that could help Saliba is sometimes lacking in concentration, almost being too calm. You can't get at Saliba. Gabriel, maybe he'll step out and be aggressive. I mean, even on that, I'm interested to see the battles. Even if they start Richarlison. Richarlison is nothing to write home about, but the physical battle, a bit like with us and Jesus, naturally players will gravitate towards the central base figure, and then there opens up space. I'm keen to see Saka against Ndogi. I'm keen to see either Trossard or Martinelli on the left-hand side. I do think both teams will concede. I think both teams probably allow too many shots on target, more so Spurs. So I think it'd be a fantastic matchup, man. I spoke to a Spurs fan for a video to come out, and I predicted 2-1 Arsenal. He went with 3-3. What do you go with?
2-0. I think
I'd love a clean sheet at the Emirates as well. I'd love that.
I think Spurs will cause us some problems, but I think they're massively. If you look at their XG numbers, they're running hot on every single
They've got like 7 different goal scorers. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, so and look, and credits it because also I will retain this. Spurs fans used to clown us for the whole Mikel's bringing the club together. Oh, isn't it win? Because they were in their sort of Conte, Mourinho, Ligue 1 era,
and they were
they were in that era, right? And
they were celebration police as well. You saw the scenes in their last Premier League game.
Oh yeah, and I look at that and I go, fair enough, because that's what you want at a club, and that's what we were trying to get, and that's what we've got now, and great. And they found their sort of footballing mentor, but it's a bit like we're kings of analogies today, right?
Yeah,
there's what I would say is it's sometimes when you get out of you see someone get out of a really bad relationship or a toxic relationship, and they immediately jump into like what seems like a really lovely, like, oh, they're so different from Steve, and they're so nice, and they don't hit me, and they all like, you know, whatever it is, you're like, oh god,
king of analogies today,
and
man.
they're saying, but Steve is like, or the new boyfriend is like very average, but what he's doing is just doing all the good. He's just
all the competencies that were lacking. So he looks amazing.
He's just being a really nice dude. I don't think Ange is gonna change the world, but what I think he can do is pull a team together, stop like abusing the players and like being and calling them out in press conferences and all these sorts of stuff. Do the right things, foster a thing. I just think that next level beyond, let's say, third or fourth in the Premier League, I don't see him getting to.
And one thing I think,
and just to finish the relationship analogy, I think they found that they're in that sort of first honeymoon period where they're like, oh, he's so nice. And eventually, not that they'll get bored of him, but he's not going to take them over the line, I don't think.
You hit the nail on the head in that. I actually think he's a fantastic manager from what I've seen, and I wasn't rating him at first. I was one of them ignorant fans just slandering my Spurs brethren. Like, yeah, man, you bought him from Celtic. He's not good. He's not going to do nothing. Harry Kane's gone. But just the way he speaks, yeah, literally. Just the way he speaks, he's a very likable man. I think his tactics are interesting. I agree with you in that. I think for right now, he's kind of what we failed to do with Emre, in that he's kind of the guy to steady the ship and stop the beef going on and stuff. And then they probably need another manager. I think they're quite fortunate that they've only had one game this week. But I do feel it's still, and even when their form goes, I'll still say this, I genuinely think it's still a bit of a managerial bounce. As you said, it's a honeymoon. Everything's going right. We've been here under Unai Emery. We went like 20 games unbeaten and everything was great. So we'll have to see, really. And I mean, no one wants to lose a game like this. I think Spurs haven't won in 12 visits to the Emirates. I don't think they've ever been in better stead in recent years to come to the Emirates and get a result. So we'll have to see exactly what's going on. Last question, man, because I didn't have a chance to ask you. The Ivan Toney links have been a bit aggressive this week in relation to January. Do you think we get him? Would you take him? What's your thoughts with Ivan Toney?
Not for me. Not for me.
Oh, why, man? I thought you rate him.
No.
Oh, your heart's with Osimhen.
I rate him. He's a good player.
Osimhen's got your heart, man.
The question is, who's gonna come in and take us to challenging in Champions League finals? That is my question.
He can't do that alone.
Yeah, and it's like I'm not saying Tony's a bad player. Tony could keep us at the level we are now. I think he 100% could do that. As we've spoken about before, I think we need that next level of striker. Tony does his best work, and again, sorry to. He's another guy. I don't even think he's praised for everything he does other than score goals, if I'm honest with you. And this is why you share your screen. We're about to get hit with some knowledge. He's a very, very good player, but look at what he does, right? In terms of penalty, in terms of his best work, or where he does a lot of what he does,
it's not in the center.
He's facilitating and he's coming out to the left-hand side in this team. And again, it's not to say that, you know, in a different team, that could be more spread out. In this Brentford team, it works that he can't drift over to the left, fine, whatever. But look at where he's standing. He's around the box. He's facilitating in the exact same way.
It's almost Jesus-like.
In the exact same way, like Jesus, right? So you look at him in
probably got to go to last season, isn't it? Really,
last season, he's around the box. He's in the box sometimes, but there's so much work around the box.
Selflessness.
But essentially, when you go and look at a Victor Osimhen, he is a penalty box striker. More, as in he can do other things.
He's more interested in just scoring goals, and But you
can see, he is a box presence, and I think we can get that facilitation that we want from a striker in a Victor Osimhen and a Gabi Jesus. But the thing we're missing is that penalty box demon. And that's not what Tony is. And he's a good player, but we need the next level for this team is to not lose that facilitation, not lose that ability to, you know, get your wingers involved or whatever, which I don't think we would with an Osimhen, but also have that absolute penalty box arrival, headers, goals, like 6 yard, and also shots from outside. You know, that's someone who just dominates the box, and that's what.
And I think I agree wholeheartedly with you in that. I think Ivan Toney isn't someone that's not going to get us over the line, but a bit like when Liverpool bought 1-2 players, I'm sure obviously Mo Salah became great and Mane became great. You know, if you get a couple of these players that are fairly competent and suddenly they're part of a group, is quite lit. I think what I would say goes for Tony in that I think he fits kind of what you just said and articulated with Jesus. He fits the modern day striker of what Arteta demands. He's 28. He's been given a taste of playing for England. I'm sure he wants to be part of the upper champagne levels of football. I think in this day and age, Ivan Ferguson's going to cost 100 odd at being conservative. Osman's going to. Is it Evan or is it Ivan Tony? Evan Tony. Evan Ferguson. Sorry. Yeah. Ivan Ferguson. Evan Ferguson. I was on my roll here, but he's going to cost a lot. Osman's going to cost like 120. Tony's probably 50, 60 because he's got 18 months on his deal and he has got a new agent. He is Premier League proven. As you mentioned, he drops deep. He can score pens. He can score headers. I like his mentality. I'm sure Arsenal fans have seen the verbal. Where I kind of go against it is like what you're saying. We got 80 odd goals last year. If we could get a striker that can get 20, 30 and get us to 100 odd, that turns some defeats into draws, some draws into victories. And like you said way earlier in the stream, when you're looking at Champions League finals and people that can just get you out of problems, I'm for that. I do think we maybe are looking at it, myself included, a bit like it's an impossible job in that we want a striker that can do the Jesus Tony thing. But as you said, a penalty box demon. Yeah. To play devil's advocate, though, could you argue Mikel Arteta don't want a penalty box demon? Because Eddie was that, and Eddie's not that anymore.
100%. You could argue that. The one thing with Ivan Toney, have you seen the Diary of a CEO interview?
Yeah, man, he's a bit of a
It's just a little bit mercenary for me. It's a little bit.
Respectfully to Brentford, you couldn't do that at Arsenal, man. You couldn't.
And I get, but
it's a bit like Mbappe at PSG. You're not going to do that at Madrid.
If that's what he's saying publicly, what's he saying privately? Like,
get me.
And it's like,
remember when he said F Brentford? Pretty girl talks to him. He says F Brentford in the video. He's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I just look. People can do what they want. Like it's their life. But I also just think sometimes you get a sense. You see when say a Saka speaks compared to a Tony. Like you can see that there's a. And I appreciate that Saka's at this level and Tony wants to get there, but there's a calmness, even though he's aware that maybe there's going to be other opportunities. It's just like, I'm here now, I'm focusing on this, and that's in the media. And maybe you have different conversations privately, and that's fine. That's up to you. But if you're in the media going, I want to move, it's like, mate, come on, like.
But I would say, in his defense, not to defend him, he's playing that game, man. He's playing that game. You've got a new agent. You're talking. You're engineering it. You mentioned Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank was saying, the right price, this, that, and the third. I don't think Brentford are going to put up too much of a fight. Ironically, Brentford have probably never been better yet to sell Tony, and that they've had to do without him. So we're going to have to see, man. Last question, once again, man. Let people know where they can find you. What videos you got to come out today before I let you get out of it? It's been a great show again, man.
Go to youtube.com/Babs14. I post videos every single day. I'm on the Different Knock at Different Knock.
This guy,
at Diff Knock, and I'm also on the Cannon Pod. I still need to get you on a live, mate. Maybe are you free this Sunday?
What time?
Sunday evenings. We do like a live
after
show
the game. Should be able to.
Let me get back to you because I want to get you on. I want to get you on a live show. And yeah, man, I need to go because I need to sort this dead trim. So I've got an appointment at 2, so I got to shoot, man.
Yeah, man. People, let's let him go out of here. Let him get a haircut. Hopefully, the haircut isn't in vain and we win the North London derby. And the next time we're speaking on whatever platform is 3 points. It's been a great start to September. Let's keep going. You know where to find the guy. All the information is going to be in the description and tagged in the video. Everybody stay safe, stay blessed, like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. We're out, man. Safe.
Pleasure. There's always just that active red line defending. I think like